The end of the petrodollar. The news has been out for a few weeks now, and I want all the hype around the subject to settle down a little bit before I go into the subject myself and give you guys my own take on it. The big question is, of course, what is the impact on US dollar, global economy, and perhaps geopolitical issues around the world for the next coming years? Instead of throwing a bunch of thoughts and points to my audience, I want to dissect this topic into 4 sectors. So we'll go into China, US, Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the world. First, let's talk about China, since this is a Chinese perspective, China. From the Chinese current position, it's not that big of a deal. There are many Chinese economic and geopolitical channels that talked about this topic, but most of them are downplaying the impact. China want to continue to de-dollarize and push forward other form of currency for trade among its trading partner, renminbi or some future BRICS currency, I would say. However, it is still holding a vast amount of US dollar in its hands as well. So it is not eager to cut US dollar off completely at this moment. It want to be able to make payments to Saudi Arabia for oil in currency both US dollar and renminbi of its choosing. It's not eager to make renminbi into some kind of petrodollar, no. This is maybe a concept I need to explain more in my future video. China is not aiming to run this global financial empire like the US is currently running, well, at least not at the moment. But we want to protect its industry manufacturing sector. So if we start to export a lot of currency, it will artificially increase the value of the currency, and that will spell doom to our manufacturing sector. So that's something we do not want to do. And this is also a topic I'd like to talk to in the future about US trying to reindustrialize itself. It's difficult, if close to impossible to do without United States having some kind of control over its financial sector first. But again, that'll be a future topic. Another point is that the biggest effect at this stage to China is more psychological, I would say, for this ending of petrodollar. It shows that such an important global south country such as Saudi Arabia is diversing away from a US-centric world and converging on this multipolar world, which China and Russia and many other countries are pushing forward. Middle East has been heavily influenced by the United States over the past few decades, and Israel plus Saudi Arabia were the 2 core US allies in the region, right? Saudi Arabia re-establishing tie with Iran and pivoting away from US towards BRICS is a major geopolitical power shift, which drive more confidence into global south countries around the planet. So China will push forward with this multipolar world agenda, knowing it has a major commodity supplier such as Saudi Arabia willing to come along. So this is more a psychological thing to China. Now let's go to United States. The impact on US is bigger indeed than, let's say, to China. However, I want my audience to understand what United States is today in relationship with the rest of the world, and then we can look at the impact of the petrodollar issue, all right? And United States as a country went through several phases, and today's US is very different from what it was in the past, okay? We have the United States immediately after the post-World War II era, with over half of the world's manufacturing capability located in US, and the rest of the world is more or less destroyed. And US at that time used its dominating position to serve as an anchor for the new global monetary system. That changed during the Vietnam War. When the dollar unanchored itself from gold, the world entered the era of whatever, let's just print fiat currency money, right? Back then, the petrodollar deal with the Saudi Arabia is significant agreement, I would say, because it is helping to stabilize the price of oil. The oil was fluctuating a lot back then. And to price the oil in US dollar exclusively helped both United States and Saudi Arabia at that time. So it's a win-win situation. And you can say that somewhat it served as a kind of backbone for US dollar status as reserve currency back then. However, things have changed over past few decades, all right? US, or more accurately, the banking oligarch of the US has used its dominating financial monetary position to project heavy influence over many countries around the world, including controlling and manipulating many public media outlets to serve its political interests. I've talked about this in my previous video. In US, for example, one would say that the banking oligarch has the biggest decision power over the government lobby system, followed by, I would say, military industrial complex, energy sector, and pharmaceutical being perhaps a distant fourth. So I call it the big four, who has the biggest influence and leverage over the US political system. Now, using this same method, US has now cast its influence over onto other countries as well, especially its Western allies, slowly eroding away those countries' sovereign decision power making body and turning them into some kind of close orbiting satellite or client state. Some people say vassal, but I think vassal is a bit too much to describe all US allies. I think many of them still have decision body power that belongs to their own country, but it's just not, many of them just not in a dominating position. Let's put it that way. I mean, just look at the leader back then in Europe and compare to the leaders right now, right? Back then in Germany, you have, these brilliant gentlemen, and now look at what you have right over there. And then same goes with France. You have, Charles de Gaulle, and right now, who do you have? That. Well, it's not that bad by Chinese standard, but, a lot of my European friends really do not like Macron. Chinese actually like Macron. I don't know why. Maybe he's good looking for the, Chinese ladies. For United Kingdom as well, you have Churchill and Thatcher, and what do you have? What is that? I don't know. Can anybody really expect, Richard Sunak have real power? I don't see any. and same thing goes here in South Korea and Japan as well. South Korea and Japan actually have some brilliant leader in the past, but now is, especially over the last 2 years, I would say that, and some other Chinese people as well say that it seems like a hidden, US regime change operation, and usher in these two new prime minister and president, and they just I don't want to say, I want my South Korean and Japanese friend to comment on their own leaders, right? I don't want to project my own thoughts onto them too much. So what we have witnessed since the petrodollar began is the vassalization and the erosion of sovereignty of many of the US Western allies, with governments and leaders funded by the oligarchy ruling elites behind them, who all have this deep-seated financial interest binded to the current global financial system. So what I'm trying to point out here is that petrodollar plays an important role back then because the major Western powers played a counterbalance position against US as a leverage, right? But today, those Western countries have mainly become just subordinate and client states. And you have the US in a dictating position with other major Western countries and currencies on a short leash. So this kind of pricing agreement US has with Saudi serve as a perk if it can be maintained. But today it's not as vital as it was anymore because US eliminated most of the competition in the currency market by colonizing their political system. Remember, I showed you guys the global world order pyramid system in my previous video right here. Now, I'm going to show you guys another pyramid, which is an inverse upside down pyramid with asset at the very bottom to be the most secure and the asset at the top to be most risky right here. You can see at the bottom is gold, followed by national currency, debt security, equity, and derivatives. What people picture back then is perhaps oil somewhat substitute the position for gold as a backbone for US dollar, as a national currency and global reserve currency, right? That was our image. But today, the table has turned, all right? US, by pulling the wealth of global oligarch class, and not just Western oligarch, but many global South countries as well, including China, by the way, into the equity, debt, security, and derivative markets surrounding the US dollar-based financial instruments, US successfully consolidate the position of US dollar without having to have that strong of a commodity such as gold or oil or manufacturing productivity strength to back its currency. So today is very different from what happened 50 years ago. If you guys do not understand, of course, you have to pause and think about this, all right? So this government of the Western countries are controlled and funded by the wealthy oligarch class, which often become transnational, and their interests are bound to the US-led global financial system. So they cannot feasibly make decisions against their own wealth. It means that they cannot make decisions against the interests of the US-led financial system. They already become this kind of jumbo juice of this upper pyramid. So a lot of their wealth is deeply trapped into this Western equity and derivative market. So they want to protect their own interests, right? Now, furthermore, there are other reasons as well. The US has become a major crude oil producer, and China had become the biggest crude oil buyer. Back then, it was different, right? US was buying a lot of Saudi oil. So you can say Saudi Arabia has become somewhat of a competition to the United States on this matter. So this is a point that many Chinese economists and geopolitical analysts are making, that Saudi Arabia is actually competing with the United States in the oil market. Of course, at the end, Saudi Arabia going off and trading oil with other currency does weaken US global position, but I don't see it as fatal at the moment. What can be fatal, however, is maybe this is part of a chain of events that Saudi and the BRICS has planned together to usher in some kind of new financial system to replace the Western dominated system at the moment. For example, Saudi will eventually start to integrate with this Enbridge system that BRICS nations is putting up. Now, that will pose a major problem for United States, I would say. Now, moving on to Saudi Arabia. This can be a serious issue, I would say, Saudi Arabia. But let me explain my thoughts why first. As of now, I don't think Saudi Arabia has that much payment options for its oil. Most of the global South currency are very unstable. The offshore renminbi volume is too small to meaningfully replace US dollar or other major Western currency as a payment method. So there's not that many choice. Saudi will still have to take in a lot of US dollar as payment. I don't think they will want to take in Argentina pesos or something like that as a payment for their oil. However, this might be a major step Saudi is taking towards utilizing and integrating with a future BRICS currency or CBDC to diversify its risk from using USD. As I said in previous points, too much dependency on USD means political obedience to the US-led world order, which is asking everyone to alienate Russia and China, for example. So Saudi can't hold its asset in US or Western-led financial instruments if it want to continue to be friends of Russia and China. and that is a choice Saudi Arabia have to make, what kind of balance you have to play. And I think that the middle ground is getting smaller and smaller, and eventually it might disappear. So Saudi Arabia have to make a choice by themselves. I've always said that. Also, many Chinese geopolitical analysts is saying that MBS is dancing on a knife edge with Saudi Arabia's foreign policy. Now, just because this doesn't hurt US that much, it doesn't mean that US is not going to be offended and seek chance to punish or revenge on Saudi Arabia and MBS. Among many so-called US allies, people like Erdogan and MBS have been, relatively speaking, behaving in a naughty way, right? As you guys can see, the coup in Turkey back in 2016, and also the assassination of Saudi journalists that was completely blamed on to MBS. This is kind of like a trap, right? To pin and hold evidence of crime against foreign leaders in order to force them to be obedient. It's a political instrument, I would say. Getting too close with Russia and not abandoning its friendship with Russia since the Ukraine war, that's strike one to me. That's a serious offense, all right? Not follow US request to form official diplomatic tie with Israel. I know that is difficult for Saudi Arabia to take, especially after the Gaza crisis. But again, that's outside of US and Israel's plans. So that's strike two. Now, MBS has been invited to G7 meeting last week, but he refused. Now, with this petrodollar incident, that might be strike three. And now I think MBS and Saudi Arabia need to be careful with what might happen next. I'm not saying it's for certain, but who knows? Maybe Operation Saudi Arabia Spring is a goal now. So some kind of covert operation underway. Who knows? And MBS really need to watch out from my perspective and many other Chinese perspective as well. Now, to the rest of the world, I don't think this matters that much. For example, Western countries that's dominated by US foreign policy, if US start to call Saudi Arabia bad boy and put sanctions on Saudi Arabia or MBS and its oil export, which Western country is gonna disobey that sanction, right? You have Nord Stream getting blown up. If some Western country insists on buying oil from Saudi Arabia, I don't know. Will certain entities start to torpedo those oil carrying cargo ships and sink them and blame it on a third party? It might happen. Who knows? So I doubt there's many Western countries that will act differently and go against the sanction, right? For the global south, they might as well ignore the sanction, like they ignore the sanction against Russia. Now, will Saudi Arabia start to sell oil in another currency to global south countries? Possibly, especially to bigger country that they want to build a political relationship with as some kind of goodwill gesture. So, for example, with Brazil or with India, if Saudi Arabia is willing to sell their oil in those local currency, when US really start to put pressure on Saudi Arabia can ask those countries for help, right? Since I give you oil in rupees or in pesos, then you need to start helping me out as well and stand on my side if the West or US push us too hard. So that is possible, yes. Now, this is my take on the petrodollar issue. Please let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I will see you guys in the next video. Do not forget to like the video and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.